This is Do It for a Living, your source for inside information on the future of automotive performance.
There's some key design points that were either missing or just not strong enough with the stuff that's on the market, and that's why I wanted to make one for myself. I'm an engineer. I had engineer friends, and by the time I was done drawing it and setting it out for prototype, I had 4 or 5 friends who were saying, "Oh, hey, just cut one more than you're planning on cutting. Cut 2, cut a third for me."
What's holding you back from starting or growing your business into what it can be? Well, if you're listening to this, it's not a lack of information. What you're about to hear is all you need to get motivated and start making waves. Do It for a Living podcast details the journey of today's true players in their own words. Find out how they broke out so you can too. The time is now. The time is always now.
Welcome back to another episode of Do It for a Living. I'm Todd Ersley with my shop assist, and today I've got with me Joe Gambino, and he is the founder of Rogue Fabrication. And so they make a really cool tube bending machine that I've actually seen in a lot of shops that I visit pretty regularly, and so I've always thought it was really cool. I've built or helped Kevin of Evolution Dynamics build a few cages, and we have a little hand pump hydraulic bender, and it's always really tough to use, and it takes a lot of time. And so always thought that these guys had a super cool product, and I'm really excited to have him on the podcast today. So we kind of want to get things started with the personal history of yourself. Where did you grow up? What did you do as a kid? What was your kind of education or background? Just kind of take us back and just kind of give us some insight into yourself.
I was a pretty good kid in high school in terms of grades. Like most gearheads, I did some shenanigans and stuff you wouldn't want your kids to do.
Yep.
Parents didn't know. And then I ended up going to college here in Oregon at Oregon Tech, which is down in Klamath Falls, which is a very small town, like a kind of farming, rural community place. Mm-hmm. And that school just does basically medical and engineering. And I went there for mechanical engineering, and I got a minor in business as well.
Oh, so that was a pretty good combo to get things going.
Yeah, and to be honest, I had no intentions when I was in college of ever owning my own business. I was dead set on having a W-2 income for the rest of my life. Well, until I was retired. I did not want to worry about sales or marketing or anything like that. It sounded stressful.
So what did you do right out of college when you graduated?
My graduation was kind of funny. So like I said, I studied pretty hard, and I had a really great GPA, Dean's List, summa cum laude or whatever, all that. But that was all because I wanted to get a good high-paying job and be desirable by industry. Mm-hmm. And my college and also Oregon State and Portland State all participate in a thing called MECOP. It's the Multiple Engineers Cooperation Opportunities Program. It's basically a way to get students into industry doing meaningful internships and very, very challenging and demanding interview processes to get them used to, being in engineering in a meaningful way, not just pushing a cart with semiconductors on it for an internship or, cutting 2x4s. They're actually doing engineering projects and getting feedback on them as an engineer. And so it's only open to upperclassmen. It's a 2-year program. It requires you to take 6 months off of school, so it delays your graduation. But it's very, very, very worthwhile, and it benefited me. I went to Garmin for my first internship, which of course requires you taking a term off school, and then my second one I went to Leupold & Stevens. They're a rifle scope and optics manufacturer here in Oregon, and they actually convinced me to transfer campuses to a Portland satellite campus for Oregon Tech and finish graduating there while I continued working as a salaried engineer. So I was actually titled as a product designer because I didn't have an engineering degree yet. But that's actually the way I graduated. I graduated taking night school because I was working full time during the day as a product designer. I was in my career before I actually graduated. They liked the work I was doing, and I liked the work I was doing, and we made a deal that made sense. And so I graduated in 2009. So that was after 5 years from when I started, which is about right for MECOPs. They usually take an extra year because you lose 6 months of, you lose 2 full terms of a 3-term year. So.
Yep, I did the same thing. I did the same thing in college. I worked for strangely enough, it was a manufacturing facility that made picture frames. And so they brought me in to do like efficiency analysis and streamline their operations. And then went over to Tyco Electronics to work with some semiconductor stuff and wind tunnels. So yeah, I'm pretty familiar with, that it's a cool way to kind of get your foot in the door in these places. And it obviously worked well for you. It turned into a real job before you even graduated. So that's pretty cool. So how long did you work? Like what was the next steps? How long did you work there? And, did you work your way up or did you start doing other stuff pretty quickly?
I did start working my way up. I was there for 3.5 years, and I started off in what was called their continuation engineering department, which was basically maintaining their legacy product line, stuff that was already in production. And then from there, I went into new product development, specifically the tactical product development side. So I was designing, optics products for the military. The goal on those was either to satisfy an existing contract or develop products speculatively for future contracts. And those are, of course, also usually consumer available products. And that was really rewarding. It was a lot of fun. And I did eventually move on to a few other places of employment as an engineer. But when I was at Loophole was when I actually started Rogue Fabrication, the company that I founded, and it's now my full-time job.
Okay. And so I guess I'm trying to think of how to say this. Do you still stay in the same area? It sounds like you grew up in Oregon, went to college there, and just kind of wanted to stay put.
Yeah, I'm 22 miles or whatever from Hillsboro now. So I just moved across town basically, mostly for family and recreation. I found myself going to the Mount Hood, that is, a lot more often than the beach. And Hillsboro is on the beach side of Portland, and Sandy, where we are now, is on the mountainside, for those of you who don't know Portland area. So
you're still kind of sticking in the same spot. So walk us through the inception of Rogue Fabrication. You mentioned earlier that you never really intended to become a business owner and entrepreneur. So what was like the catalyst to make I guess it started with a tube bender. What was the catalyst to make that machine?
Really, an IRS loophole was really the catalyst that caused this. So when I was in college, I was a typical poor college kid, and the thing that I spent all my extra dollars on was just off-road toys, full-size stuff like Toyotas. I had a pickup, and then I sold it, and I got a 4Runner, and I was putting a Supra engine in it and Unimog axles, and I did my own suspension system. I did all the work on it from scratch myself, welding and making sparks in the garage like any other gearhead. And when I got to my first real job and I was actually paying taxes, like on a substantial enough income to be looking for write-offs, I had this $10,000 to $15,000, some would call it a waste of money, some would call it an investment, depends what you do with it, but this 4Runner. And if you use it as a test platform or for advertising and promotional stuff for a business that appears to the IRS to be attempting to generate profit, then you can carry over losses to your personal income taxes 2 out of every 5 years. And I realized, hey, I could just get like $2,000 to $3,000 in my pocket if I do this correctly for 5 years. Yep. I just have to have a business for it. And there was some stuff I already wanted to make anyway, and I was like, well, I can make a web page and just make it look like I'm selling this stuff, and I'll sell a few. And the first thing I did was wheel centers for H1 wheels. It's for the first generation Humvee, the H1. They have a split 16.5-inch wheel that clamps onto a center ring. Okay. And that clamps both beads of the tire to the wheel and makes it so the beads can't fall off. It's great for off-road. You can air down. Yep. You won't ever have a tire fall off, and it's great. And you can take those Humvee wheels and bolt them on basically nothing stock except for a Humvee. So you cut the centers out and weld different centers in. I came up with a kind of slightly different, style of center than what everybody else had. Wasn't worlds better, wasn't any cheaper, just different. And that was the business. I kicked it off, and 2 years later was when I really was shopping hard for a tubing bender, and I could not stand anything that was out there for the money. None of them looked really that much of value to me in terms of, how much you got for the money, and the dies were tremendously expensive. I mean, the bender was $300 and the dies were like $400 to $500 a piece. Yeah, okay. And you had to drill holes into your floor to mount these things so you could pull on a bar manually to operate them. That's like the horizontal ones, huh? Yeah, exactly. And they work great. They make awesome bends. They're accurate once you learn how to use them. But you got to make a stand for it. And drilling holes into your floor when you're renting is a really unattractive mounting method.
Yep.
And you can make a hitch mount for it, or you could get a ballast and fill it with sand and mount it to that. I mean, there's lots of other options, but they all just seemed like, oh my, there must be a better way. And that was when I started designing the tubing bender, the Model 600, which is our main product we sell now. And that was back in, I think, 2010 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
So that was quite a while ago when that started. But that's really the product that launched us into being an actual business, not just someone's side hustle or tax evasion plan.
Yeah.
Really.
So, like, how many of those initial hub adapter things did you actually sell?
We were selling, like, in the very first year, I probably sold like 3 sets, and they're, a couple $100, so almost none. But as business grew a little bit, we probably sold 5 or 10 the next year. It was like maybe 1 a month. So this is nowhere near, and this isn't even beer money for most people.
Yep.
But when we started the tubing bender, we got a lot more traffic to our webpage. Sales increased on, everything proportionately. And so at the peak, we were probably selling one set of wheel centers a week, maybe 2. I mean, still not a lot. It's never been a big product for us. And a lot of the shops we were competing with on them were in areas of lower labor cost, and they were using plasma cutters or lower grade steel. And most people that are buying those things don't care about any of those things.
Yep.
And so it was really tough to say, hey, buy ours instead because they're better. Here's the 3 reasons why. Some of them are just kind of, fluffy, good for the environment kind of stuff, like, better labor or supply chain, or it's made here instead of made overseas.
It's tough to kind of get the consumers to get on your side with some of that stuff.
We're phasing them out because it's not worth the inventory and the liability and everything else, because it's a very low volume product for us at this point.
Of course. Yeah, that's not the main concern going forward. What was the design kind of idea behind the tube bender? Did it just kind of like come to you one day, or did it take several iterations to kind of get it to the point that it is today?
It has had a lot of iterations, but the real basis of the design is relatively unchanged. If you look at the first bender and the current revision, and we've revised it about 25 times, I don't revise the assembly. I just revise the parts that go in it, because the assembly hasn't changed enough to really warrant a revision change. But the highest revision part we have is on revision AB. So for those not in engineering or something similar,
28.
That's 23 or 4, depending how many letters you skip. You skip 0 or O because it looks like 0, and I because it looks like 1. But you go through the alphabet once, then you go to AA, AB, AC, AD. So we've gone through the alphabet once already on 2 or 3 of the parts. So it's been revised a lot, mostly for adding features, some for improving how well it operates or how easy it is to operate, and others like error proofing things, like just making it simpler to learn. But it is still basically the same goal as it originally was, and that was to provide better value than what's currently out there. It's not the cheapest bender you can get. You can get manual benders that make similar bends on similar material for $50 to $80 less shipped, depending where you are in the country. I mean, we're talking pocket change compared to a $700 investment. But the big thing is it's always been portable, small footprint, very inexpensive dies, and tremendously hard to break. The dies are very, very, very robust because of the way they're designed, and they're very flexible for a few different things, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But there's some key design points that were either missing or just not strong enough with the stuff that's on the market, and that's why I wanted to make one for myself. And I'm an engineer. I had engineer friends, and by the time I was done drawing it up and sending it out for prototype, for laser cutting and all that, I had 4 or 5 friends who were saying, "Oh, hey, just cut 1 more than you're planning on cutting. Cut 2, cut a third for me." And so pretty soon I was like, okay, this is a business. And so I cut 10 of them and started selling them. And that's really when I first looked at my business and thought this could eventually be my job. But it was a long way from there to it being a job.
So what about at what point did you transition away from the full-time engineering gig? Like, was there a turning point, like one specific item of like, I want to sell X amount of these a week, or was it just you were working too many hours and had to get out of it? What really caused the going full-time and doing it for a living in that case?
Yeah, that's a valid question. I've got probably a very long story of an answer for you. But, so I was working at Leupold when I started it. I didn't have the tubing bender designed while I was working at Leupold. I finished there in 2012, and I moved on to PCC, Precision Cast Parts Corporation, and they make titanium investment castings for the aerospace industry and a bunch of other industries, and they also make super alloy steel. And they've got tons of other plants, big worldwide company. I was at the mothership, the titanium plant, their favorite plant, basically. It's their big money maker. And PCC is a very interesting company, very dynamic, very high profit, has a reputation for being difficult to work for.
Okay. Just big company stuff.
Yeah, I'll let your listeners look it up on Google if they want to find the worst stories they can find. But it's big company stuff, and it's a very rewarding place to work, and mostly financially. But it was a good experience for me, that's for darn sure. But while I was working there, I took a phone call for an order, and every time I got a phone call, I'd see it on my cell phone, and I'd just start a timer or write down a time. I usually write it down in pencil on a paper on my desk, and I'd duck out of the office, call them back from my car, finish up the order, process their credit card, go back in, write another time down. I'd make sure to make up my time because I was salary. I didn't have to clock in and out, but I wasn't ripping off my employer. And so I just stayed a little bit late on those days. And the one day when I sold 3 tubing benders in one day, that was when I thought, this will be my job in a year.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to be doing investment casting, part manufacturing, design, or anything related to rifle scopes within a year.
Okay.
I'll be doing this. But after PCC, I went to Flir. Flir is another Oregon-based company started by an OSU grad.
That's the infrared cameras, right?
Yeah, they do thermal and infrared, and I squared and a bunch of other really cool stuff, but mostly super expensive gimbal camera systems for helicopters and airplanes. They're really, really fascinating product. Really challenging place to do engineering work for in a really good way. I loved working there, but I worked there as a temp, and I started off there to help them through a temp agency, and then I switched to direct contract because then I could have more control over my hours and get a better wage. And then I switched down to 2 days a week because Rogue Fabrication was taking a lot of my time. For a while there, I was working like 40 hours for Rogue and 40 for the, for regular company. And then I started cutting it down when I was at Flir and doing
that's
a lot
pretty
of
cool.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really convenient way to taper it down because my wage went up, my benefits went to zero. I got benefits
because contract you don't get benefits, you just get paid more.
Exactly, you just get paid. And I'd got married within that time and had my first kid, my son Dominic, and so that was obviously taking time too. So it was really a high pressure, just funnel of life, pressure, and my wife and I had a lot of discussions about it. And hey, you're working 2 jobs. What's the game plan here?
Yep.
And I told her, hey, these are going to sell. It's going to be the thing, and I'm going to taper this down. We're going to balance it all out. And after Flir, they ended up having a bad quarter or something, and they ended up having to cut all their contractors, which included me, which was not that big of a deal. And then I consulted for 2 other companies. One was a suspension company, and one was a company making gyro-stabilized turret machine gun mounts for Browning M2 machine guns for boats. And those were both really, really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
But they both had a very, very limited amount of product development money.
Yeah.
And so they had very few hours to do. So I probably only, 100, 150 hours for each of them. But those were good also because those were all remote, which is further disconnecting me from the corporate landscape.
Yeah, you don't have to leave your house.
Exactly. I was doing those from my house in Sandy for the most part. I'd come in periodically to catch up with the team again. Oh, and then I also consulted after that for Sig Sauer Optics. Which again, very rewarding, very fun place to work. If it would have been the most sensible thing for my family for income and schedule flexibility, I'd be there right now instead of talking to you.
Yeah.
I did like working there quite a bit, and I knew the team really well from other experiences in other places. But the real struggle there that I skipped over and I want to go back to was my wife and I talking about, where this business is going. Course, did my engineer nerd thing, and I brought home a spreadsheet for my wife, who has a degree in biology and was doing medical insurance work at the time. And so she's no stranger to Excel, but she's kind of a nerd like me. But I get home with this spreadsheet, and of course, it's on an engineering size. It's 11 by 17. It's big.
Yeah, it's this bunch of numbers squeezed in there real small.
It's got profit margins and everything else. And I'm showing her, oh, hey, this is how much money I can make if I sell a tubing tubing bender, just one, and we're going to buy 10 and all this stuff. And in my head, I said, we're going to buy 10. To this day, no one's going to know. It wasn't recorded. But what she heard was, honey, I'm going to buy one, and it's going to cost me, so many $100, and I'll sell it for so many hundred more, and it's going to be great. And it's going to be a great way to dip our feet into this little pool of business. Okay. And I bought 10, and she's like, what happened to our bank account? And I'm like, what do you mean? I bought 10. I told you. And she's like, no, you didn't.
You said one.
So this was upsetting to her, obviously. And she said, this business thing, we've got, this, we didn't spend credit card money. It was out of our savings account. She said, this obviously affects both of us, but it doesn't really hurt you if this thing doesn't work out. You just lost some of our money, but it hurts me.
Yeah.
I get to play in the garage. This might be fun for you. I don't know. And I said, no, my goal is not to paint the world in tubing benders for free. I said, this is a business. And she said, well, let's put a wager on it. And I don't even know if she'd be happy if I was telling this story to people. She said, wager your 4Runner on it. If you don't have, we were engaged at the time. Okay. I say my wife was actually engaged. She said, if you don't have your 4Runner, or if you don't have these tubing benders, these first 10 sold by the time we get married in 6 months, put your 4Runner for sale, and not for some, crazy price that no one will call on.
Yeah,
put it for sale.
Like actually going to sell it, huh?
Yeah, put it for sale for 75% of what you think someone would buy it for, like within a week. Do it like the sale in a day price. And she swears to this day that was not something she would ever make me do, because she says she feared that I would resent her for it, which it didn't come to that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't think. But
yeah, that's not a good way to start your honeymoon when you're forced to sell your toy.
Yeah, but she said no. She said that was a game of chicken, and I was going to swear first. But the point was, you had to start the game of chicken with me, or else I wasn't going to let you do it, because I wanted to make sure you were serious and sincere.
It's the skin in the game.
Exactly. So that happened. We'd sold like 22 units by the time that date.
More than doubled her initial threat number. Yeah.
The first came back from a show with a fistful of cash, and she was like, "Oh wow, that's surprising." And I ordered 10 more, and kept on rolling and snowballing, and doing what well-founded businesses do, and it grew. So
yep. Yeah, so touching back on the progress of the transitioning to the company, it sounds like it was a very easy, fluid, gradual process. There wasn't like a light bulb or tragedy, or just like, okay, I'm just going to keep moving around, lowering hours, the orders are going up. It's very like opposite slope curves there for your time spent at other people's businesses to your own. Exactly. It was like a rectangle cut corner to corner. Yeah. As my personal typical W-2 work, which then switched to 1099 and then to corp, ramped down, and those hours in demand ramped down, including commuting. The business, it didn't ever ramp up because I was already doing it for 40 plus hours a week. Yeah. But I did get to, see a return to more of a normal family man lifestyle schedule. Exactly. And so that helped a lot. We have 2 kids now, and it was during my son's first 2 years that whole high pressure thing cranked in. Mm-hmm. And I promised my wife, I said, this is not going to be a 10-year plan to transition to this being my job. This is going to be a 2-year plan. And it stuck to that. It really did work. I was still doing some consulting. The consulting, endured more than 2 years, but it didn't take away. I mean, I was doing it during business hours, and I was doing Rogue Fabrication during business hours. So my work schedule was the same, even though I was getting paid by 2 sources. That's very cool. So wanted to touch some more on the location. We kind of like to discuss the pros and cons of maybe, manufacturing something or having a business where you're at. So it sounds to me, we'll get into it more kind of later, but it sounds to me you're, or at least in the beginning, we're outsourcing the manufacturing of the actual product. So the cutting and the coating and whatever it is. In your area, I mean, I know that's kind of a pretty big engineering, kind of hub of the United States. Did that kind of help you? Like, did you know any contractors or any manufacturer places that could make it for you? Or do you think it may have been easier if you had moved maybe somewhere where the labor was a little cheaper, or, more, manufacturing based kind of area? It'd be easier and cheaper to make our product if we lived in Cleveland or, one of those other places like Michigan, like Kalamazoo or someplace where there's just a ton of machining and machine tools and labor. But Portland's not a bad place.
to have this kind of thing going. There's definitely plenty of shops that have laser cutters and the other tools that we need our suppliers to have. There's enough of them, they compete with each other. We don't live in a small enough town where there's only one person that'll do that thing that we need, so that's good. But I did know several of them from industry already, and I knew how to find more, so that helped us out quite a bit in terms of getting those things done. Basically, our product it depends heavily on laser cutting.
Okay.
It's a cheap way. It's a cheap way to put features into parts, and depending on the tolerances you need, and if you can design around them intelligently, it works fine with almost no drawbacks. But there's of course a lot of CNC machined parts in there too. Those are two tremendously expensive machines that we do not own currently, and we don't plan to own some of them still. So that stuff is still farmed out. But the biggest thing in the beginning was, we've got a ton of parts that are bandsaw cut, tapped, welded, drilled, reamed, bearings pressed in, bushings pressed in, for heat treat, they get out for plating, powder coating, sandblasting. There's a whole ton of processes. And we've brought most of that labor in. And I've got a full-time welder, and I do the backup welding. And we now have a bunch of machines to do the drilling. We've got automated sawing equipment. We've got all this stuff now to streamline things and make it faster. But in the beginning, we had these parts that were cross-drilled for a screw to make a clamp, basically. And they were 1/4 inch. So one end was tapped and one end was a through hole to make a clamp. And I had to drill them by hand with a drill. Okay, Jesus. And they was steel. It was laser cut. It took a while, so it had heat. Yeah, it had heat on the edges that affected the hardness of the metal, which makes it really difficult to drill through initially. Yep. And I had to drill a 1/4 inch hole through like 3/4 of an inch of steel that was only 3/8 of an inch wide. And talk about making scrap. I was pushing a drill bit through by hand. I didn't even have a drill press yet. And I remember the struggle of trying to find a drill press and a bandsaw for less than $100, like a horizontal bandsaw with a gravity feed head that would fit in a 2-car garage, because my 4Runner was in half the garage, that thing, and the other half was for the business. And it was just me working in the dark, not in the dark, but at nighttime. Yep. And, back in the original side hustle thing when we were first starting out, those first 10 to 20 units. And so that was really difficult. And just being able to get the tools. I mean, I think about it now and I'm like, oh, if we need a welder, or we need a drill press or something, we go buy it. Yeah. But it's easy then. Back then the money wasn't there, and it was just difficult. You can't just take all your personal money and make it business money. That's like so hard to do. So what about, maybe some kind of worry about the business? Was there ever a point that you thought like, man, I just don't know if this is going to work? Like, were there ever any tough times to get through? I want to joke with you and say, you mean like last Tuesday? No, I mean, there's volatility in sales, and it's difficult. There's been a lot of times where where I've been concerned of, oh man, things are going backwards. Sales are slow this week, this month, this quarter. What's going on? And we've pulled through all of them. It's taught me to be a much more patient and less stressed out person to have gone through all of them. But it's been pretty steady growth. There was one year where we didn't really grow, but on average we've seen, if you just annualize it over the most recent relevant years of like the last 5 years, I'd say, because before that, your sales go from $1,000 to $10,000 a year. Yeah, it's a 10x, but it's not really. Yeah, we grew 1,000%. That doesn't matter. It was $9,000. But since we hit like probably the like 6-figure mark, like in sales, like $100,000 in sales a year, like actual reasonable, pretty good sales, I'd say we've probably averaged 75 to 80% growth per year in sales. So relatively close to doubling every year. Yeah, that's fantastic. Last year was 117%. So our sales went from, if they were $100,000, they'd have been $217,000 the next year. They were obviously higher than that, but it's been pretty impressive how fast it's grown. And small businesses grow faster than big businesses. Yeah. So that's a very valid thing. But awesome. Well, what about, is there one bad experience that you can think of, whether it be with, getting the parts manufactured, getting them shipped out, maybe like customers complaining about something that you missed? Is there anything that kind of sticks out in your head that was a real big struggle for you? Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind. One of them, we made our Versa Notcher, which is it's a device we sell that clamps the tubing. And this little device bolts into a bench vise. and it has a tube vise in it, so it clamps your tubing, and a bunch of adjustments and stuff. And then a hand drill hooks up to one end with a shaft, and then a hole saw goes at the end of that shaft, and you use the hand drill to power and drive the hole saw through the tubing. And this thing is basically an articulating vise and a cutting system that allows you to notch tubing. Because once you have a hole saw shaped cut through tubing, you can now mate two pieces of round tubing together at any angle to make a junction that's welded that's pretty much perfect. So for building roll cages, bumpers, whatever, it goes great with tubing benders. And we made a really clever tubing notcher. Our customers waited forever for me to finish designing it because I kept being unsatisfied with how well it was done. Typical engineer problems. Eventually I pulled the trigger, let it go. And the first iteration of those were made with bearings. And I got quotes from the bearings made in the United States with a German design from INA, the company. And they're awesome bearings, but they were like $10 a piece, and this machine needed 2 of them, and this thing's got a ton of parts in it, and that was going to really increase the cost of the parts overall. And there was also ones in China that were nearly the same. I mean, bolts and nuts are made in China, tons of bearings are made in China. Why can't these ones be made there? Well, the races were they're like formed cup steel races, and because they're needle roller bearings, they're open element bearings, and they did not have them manufactured to tight enough tolerances, and they scratched and rubbed the shafts. They got metal shavings in them, and they failed prematurely. And it was a big problem. And our sales weren't very high back then. It was really tough to send letters to all of our customers and emails, because some of our customers don't do internet a whole lot. They're just in the garage making sparks. And tell them, hey, we screwed up, and I've got to send you new bearings and teach you how to press them in. And I was really stressed out about it. My wife was the one that said, hey, how much does this cost, the whole thing? What's the worst of it? And I said, $300 to $400 probably. And she said, don't worry about that. That's not a big deal. She said, think about what you're saying. You're stressed out about $300 or $400 to fix a problem. Send the letters, take care of it.
And just get it done.
It brought me back down to reality. I was just upset because I was like, oh my God, what if this ruins our public image? It's a recall. I hate the word recall. Someone screwed up. Someone didn't do their job. And so now we use, of course, the double sealed, super awesome, oversized element, INA, German designed, USA made, the best there is, in that location. And it's been great because, I think we had probably 2 bearing failures out of 2,000 or 3,000 notchers we've shipped. Maybe not quite that many, maybe over 1,000, but there's been a lot, and people pretty much don't wear them out. So
trying to save a few bucks ended up costing you quite a bit more in the short term and the long term, and then you just do it right the first time, huh?
Exactly. And then the other one I was making, the other mistake that cost me some money that was frustrating, I was making work instructions, just that we send out with the bender for how to weld it up. Most of them go out as weld together kits. People are thrifty, they can weld. That's why they're getting a bender, so they can bend metal and then weld that metal. Why not get a bender that's a weld together kit? So we weld them here too, but if they want to pay for it. But I needed to oversize a hole in the instructions to show something underneath the hole so I could highlight it red and make drawings out of it. And I did that, and I accidentally saved that hole as a bigger size in the design file. And 6 months later, when I went to revise it, it was too big, and I didn't notice.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And I sent them out, and I had 80 plates cut for $25 a piece.
With a hole too big.
Yeah. So that wasn't any fun at all. That's $2,000 worth of metal that showed up that was wrong, and you can drill that hole again, but it's still going to be too big.
Yeah, you can't make a hole smaller.
Yeah, you can, but it's not fun.
You can weld it. Yeah, you can't drill a hole
you can try
smaller.
And weld it, blend it, and mill it. And I didn't have a milling machine. It didn't matter anyway. It had been a nightmare. So I had to go and have weld washers, little step washers. If you cut a cross section, it looks like an L. I had to go have those CNC cut in a hurry and weld them all in, and then blend all the welds down nice and flush so that everything looked nice, and ship those out. It was frustrating. And those
yeah, I can imagine so.
Those weld washers were like $4 or $5 a piece.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
I had to buy 80 of them, so it was expensive still. But that was a little bit later in the game when it was
simple drawing oversight causes all kinds of issues.
Yeah.
Moving on to a little more positive stuff. What's something right now that's really got you fired up that you're super excited about? Me and the guys I'm working with, we're all super excited about this new product. It's another attachment for the tubing bender, the Model 600 that we sell. And like I was telling you,
that thing from the beginning, and the reason why we revised it so many times, the real goal has been flexibility, where you can get into the machine without buying some expensive automated fancy one, or should I get model A, B, or C? In the beginning, you basically pick the machine capacity. How big and how thick of wall are you going to need to bend? And within that realm of capacity, you can later add backstop attachments and thin wall attachments and automation systems to make the bends stop in the same place every time, and all kinds of things that go on later. You don't have to buy them all now.
Okay, cool.
And that's our big pitch. That's our big pitch is, you're looking at two machines. They're relatively similar. Let's say that someone doesn't actually care if they're bending horizontally or vertically, and their financial considerations are moot because they're, in the middle of the country in Arizona someplace between me and our biggest competitor, and it's the same cost either way. I'll tell them, well, what happens if your business grows? Do you have to buy a new tubing bender? If you go with the competition, you do. If you go with ours, you don't, because you can put a power system on this machine that'll bend almost 10 degrees per second and stop automatically. And you can find an operator off Craigslist employment listings for $10 an hour. You can make parts as accurately as you once you set the stop on the machine for him. And so that all of a sudden light bulbs are going off and they're like, oh my God, I could start a business. And that stuff helps us a lot. But this attachment, of course, is like all the other ones in our machine. There's been holes in our machine for this attachment for like 2 years.
Wow.
Because I've known that I've wanted to have it attached to the machine for that long. And so now we finally designed it. Some of the parts came in yesterday. Others shipped out of Texas on Tuesday. We're getting a CNC machine down there at a shop that specializes in bronze. And I couldn't be more excited to have it go together. And I've got several of our higher level promotion people who are prepared to promote it for me. There's a couple people I've found on YouTube and celebrity kind of folks over the years that I've contacted with and said, hey, let's do this. I don't have $10,000 to give you to buy commercial time, but let me just ends up in video. It does, and if it doesn't, so much that whatever. And they usually get it and are just so thrilled and excited with the customer service and the product fit and finish and everything else that they end up doing something for us.
Yeah.
And it's inexpensive for us because it's just a machine. It's just giving up a sale basically compared to normal. But it could potentially pay a lot. Just rolling the dice every time. A lot of times they're like, oh, you hope you're ready for sale. Hope you're ready to make these things because we're going to sell so many for you. And you don't get a single phone call.
You don't get anything out of it. Yeah.
No. But other times, they pay off and people call you once a month and say, oh, I heard about it here. I saw it there. And so that's always nice. But we're excited about that development. It's an attachment for the bender, so it's not a new product, but it's a big step in terms of performance. It'll improve.
Yeah, definitely interested to see that come out. So you hoping you'll have that like before, not too long? Is it kind of coming out here pretty soon? Maybe by the end of this year?
Yeah, depending on how testing goes, we'll have something released by the end of the year. It might require
That's the goal, huh? Yeah.
Could be more development in time, but we'll definitely have something on our YouTube channel and of course on Facebook and Instagram before the end of the year that says, hey, here's the new attachment, here's preliminary pricing, here's an estimated release date, and here's what it did, here's pictures of tubing bent with it and without it, look how much better it is, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Well, on that, let's take a real quick break here and then we'll be right back.
We all know owning a shop is difficult, so we created My Shop Assist to help you manage the various jobs. Whether you run a machine shop, a performance tuning shop, build off-road trucks, or even do powder coating, My Shop Assist can help you. It is completely online and will help you schedule the jobs, log time on each task, track parts orders, and take pictures of the work. You can even export your jobs from My Shop Assist into QuickBooks as invoices. So if you're interested to improve operations at your shop, check out myshopassist.com to start your 30-day free trial.
Welcome back. I'm here with Joe Gambino again of Rogue Fabrication, and wanted to get a sense about the business itself. So you kind of gave us a location, but what kind of facility are you in? How many people do you employ? How are they kind of mixed in together? Just kind of give us an overview of Rogue Fabrication as it sits like physically.
Certainly. So right now we are in a building that is 30 by 40. With 10-foot walls, so it's 1,200 square feet. And there is a room off the back that we built a year and a half ago that is another 740 square feet. So we're just under 2,000. And that's a very small amount of space for what we're doing because we're selling over $1 million a year right now. So we're moving a lot of product through a very, very, very small space. And we're building right now, right next to it, another building that is 42 by 60, but it has 16-foot walls. So we're going to have room for much more racking, much more storage,
Yeah,
taller
to go
machinery.
up, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. And,
Because
you know,
10
we
feet,
could
I mean,
just build it.
that's like pretty short as far as like a manufacturing facility goes.
Yeah, 10 feet's like a garage.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's pretty short. So we've got pallet racking in there, but we can only get 2 pallets plus a skinny one in the middle. We've got it set up really well. We're utilizing all the space, but the new building is going to have a mezzanine for an office area with work taking place underneath it. It's tall enough to be 2 stories in some areas, and then it's, you know, a lot more concrete outside the doors and things for all that. And they're super close together, the buildings. They're going to be connected by a enclosed space with a roof and all that. So it'll allow forklifts to travel between the 2 buildings and that. But we've got 6 employees. That includes myself. I'm a W-2 employee. So of Rogue Fabrication. But they're all full-time. And we've got 2 or 3 of them cross-trained between like customer service and like order packaging, so that when a customer calls, you know, sometimes they'll say, "Oh, hey, I actually just packaged your order an hour ago, and you know, what can I do for you? What do you want to know? You know, the tracking number was sent to your email. What can we do?" But you know, we've got a specialist in paint and other finishing like powder coating, although he's not doing that because we don't have powder coating equipment. But we hired him to do paint anyway.
Okay.
And so we've got those kinds of people, and we've got another person who does mostly manufacturing work, and he just, you know, he drills holes, runs a bandsaw, and does preparatory work for welding and things like that.
And then you mentioned that you're doing kind of the heavy machining is outsourced. You're still having somebody do the laser cutting for you, and then you mentioned the powder coating. So still some things that are outsourced. Are you, do you have like a logistics manager? Or are you doing that to kind of keep track of where everything's at in the process?
Yeah. So the laser cutting is the start of the process, basically. So those we don't really need to track like where they are. We have them on an open PO, an open product order.
Okay.
And so our supplier keeps 100 sets of those parts on the shelves pretty much at all times, and they just store them for us. And when we want one, we tell them, and they give us, that gives them the flexibility to fill up the sheets of material they're cutting with our parts if they have room. Mm-hmm. So whenever someone calls in and says, "Hey, I need this cut 1/4 inch right now," they know what to put on the rest of that sheet. That way they don't have to unload that sheet and load it back in and worry about how much of it's already cut out. So some knowledge of laser cutting helps a lot with getting good pricing, because you can make parts more efficient to cut and more efficient to process through a laser cutting plant. But the machine that cuts those is 1 year old or 2 years old now, and it was $780,000 without tooling.
Yeah. That's amazing.
And I don't know if it would fit in our shop.
No, probably not, because it's a big machine. Because
it's huge
because of the laser thing itself. Yeah,
it's got a sheet processor and an offloading table, and then it processes 5 by 10 sheets.
Yeah, because if you're doing 1/4 inch, you cannot move those around with manpower.
Not likely.
Yeah.
Egyptian pyramid style on a bunch of logs, maybe. But we're not going to own that machine. I don't want to. I've seen the profit margins for laser cutting operations, and I don't really want to compete with that. So, but CNC cutting, we have intentions of bringing that in small bits at a time when it makes sense. I have to do full project return on investment analysis every time we bring in a piece of machinery that's expensive. And I mean expensive, like probably over $1,000. If it can't be paid for with a job right now by taking money away from a supplier in terms of profit machine operation hours, I'm not bringing it in, period.
Okay.
Because there's bigger fish to fry. There's enough machinery and sources to eliminate from our supply chain in terms of profitability that I don't need to be looking at a machine that's going to pay for itself in 3 years, when there's 4 or 5 I could do that would pay for themselves in 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's really where we're looking. And if it ends up being 2 years, I look at it and go, great. I save that spreadsheet like a good nerd and look at it later. So.
Yes, I want to kind of touch on the planning side. You mentioned the initial giant engineering-sized spreadsheet that you made. And having kind of a business minor background, was a business plan and an ongoing business plan kind of how you operate that business?
Yes, it's mostly notes and in my head. I've got notes of like long-term business development strategy, and that's basically right now it's kind of like square footage and trajectory, like how much space will we need, how much semi-truck access will we need. We're already getting 2 to 3 semi-trucks a week, and we've got room for them, but barely. And so it's puts some pressure on the business and the location and all that, just because our driveway is not large enough to accommodate turnaround for a 53-foot truck with a sleeper, or even a 53-foot tractor trailer. So yes, it's 40-foot max, and we tell everybody 35 max because we've seen drivers with 35s that handle them like they're 53s. They can't get anywhere.
Okay.
So that keeps things easy. If someone shows up in a 40, we tell them, hey, as long as you're confident, go ahead and turn around here. It's good. If not, you're backing all the way out with us. We'll spot you. We'll help you. But so that's kind of a challenge. But the real planning is I've got a development list, and I've got that categorized in terms of how difficult the development is, how expensive the development is, and what the return on the development cost is. And so I kind of have all these projects of either the products we'd sell, maybe a larger tubing bender, maybe a tubing roller, sheet metal manufacturing stuff. These are all tools that my business could make for industry, for our customers, for enthusiasts. And I've got to look in market and see how much they sell for, how much I think I could sell ours for, what features we have that are better. And so I've got a big list of products that I want to develop, and some of them we're working on and planning to work on for a very long time. But that's kind of the development and sales growth side of it, is just what of these can we bite off and what will they do for us. And then the other one, the more like management and development one, is just I've got I honestly forgot who came up with the strategy, but it's like a 4-square prioritization method. It's like stuff that's important and stuff that's urgent. And if you cross those two things with important and less important and urgent and less urgent, you get 4 squares, and you put your stuff in those 4 squares, and that basically makes your to-do list. And it's got like a long horizon and a short horizon out of those 4 squares. And some of those things are like long-term business stuff, like getting your business name and logo trademarked within the United States. It's important, and it's not urgent at all unless someone's about to try and copy you.
Yes, yeah.
So we did that. It took a while. I had to hire an attorney to help, and it was expensive, but we did it. And so now Rogue Fabrication is a registered trademark within the United States, which doesn't do anything. It doesn't help us sell anything. It doesn't really help us at all. But if some other company pops up selling, I don't know, a commercial tube welding machine like a robotic welding machine for tubing or something that's kind of similar to ours and has similar coloration in their logos and the name Rogue but not Fabrication, I can send them a letter and say, hey, bud, we registered this first. You're going to confuse people real bad.
Yeah, please stop.
You need to just change stuff. Don't close your doors. Just change stuff so that you don't confuse people with which business they're dealing with. So that's convenient because now we know that we can invest as much as we want to within reason in marketing our name and our webpage, and know that we don't have to change it later when someone else registers first, because that law was changed within the last 10 years. It's first to file now for patent and trademark.
Yep.
So if someone files it, I'm out. So I got to it first. We've been in business for 10 years, or close to 10 years. So it makes sense that it's mine, but because no one else has
nobody else has tried. But you're still safe though, so that's good.
Yeah, you don't want anyone trolling it and going backwards on you and saying, "Oh, we're Rogue Fabrication now," and you're not. So
yeah, that would never be a fun experience. Focusing in on those products, you talked, you've got a long list of ones that you want to make, or, you may make in the future, but, you already make a pretty good amount. You've got the tube bender, you've got the notcher that you talked about, and then you've got the dies, the punch dies, I guess they'd be called. How is like the revenue sourced, or, how is the revenue broken down for those various products that you make? Does the bender just like knock it out of the park, and then everything else is just kind of like extra stuff that you just kind of like to make and make a little bit of profit on it? Or is it, spread out a little more evenly?
That's a really great question. And it's totally unclear when you visit our webpage how many of them we sell. So I'm glad you asked, because that's something that I forget that people don't have any idea about. I know, but, the bender's definitely primary. It's the first. The notcher is a close second.
Okay.
We've had race teams approach us at events like King of the Hammers, and they'll say, "Oh, we've got a $10,000 automated bender. We don't need your bender." But they're like, "Show me that thing." And they just point the notcher, and they're just focused on it, like they're addicted to it, and they don't even know what it is yet. And I mean, they know it's a notcher, and I'll tell them, "Oh yeah, this thing notches on a bend. It's portable. It does this. It does that. It does the other thing." And they're like, "How many of them do you have?" And I'm like, 30, 40, and they're like, "I want 2 of them right now." And they grab them and go back to their racetrack with them.
And they have it ready to go, yeah.
Yeah, because they're for a race team that's got a budget for $10 grand a year for tools, or maybe $100 grand a year for tools. This notcher's under $500. It's changed to them, and they would probably have an end mill notcher. It looks kind of like a lathe, but it runs kind of backward, and they're super nice. And they're like $5 grand. And they cannot clamp on a bend, and they cannot set up quickly. But for doing production stuff and thin wall, they just slay it. They're awesome. But our notcher does some other things those ones can't. And so they saw ours, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, that plugs the hole we have.
Nice, yeah.
I need it." Yeah. So for them, it makes a great deal of sense. So the notcher is definitely a good product for us in terms of sales, and we can sell them to people who maybe already have a notcher. They might just want one that can do something else in addition to their current one. The bender's tougher because it's hard to convince them to make S bends, two bends side by back to back in opposite directions to make a little dog, because they can cut the tubing and weld it and accomplish the same thing.
Yeah.
So,
but doing door bars, being able to do the S bends is like super convenient.
Oh, it's super nice.
Yeah.
And it's things that people are shopping for a bender that haven't built their cage yet. They don't know they need to make S bends.
Yeah.
Then they buy a bender and they see ours. Should have bought that one. But, but the other products are a lot smaller. Everything else is a lot lower than that. So we've got our business is basically focused on chassis fabrication tools. That's another reason the H1 wheel centers are going away. They started our company. They make sense to sell, but they don't make sense with the rest of our products. Yeah. They don't really fit in. If you're going to build a rock crawler, that's part of it. Wheel centers, totally. If you're going to recenter H1s, but they don't really fit with the rest of it if you're building a race car. So the Dimple Dies we sell, you mentioned, we sell a decent amount of those. We're the only company making shaped Dimple Dies that are for structural thicknesses. People make Dimple Dies for everything. If you guys don't know what Dimple Dies are, you cut a hole and then you put this thing in there that looks kind of like a cookie cutter for making bread dough into shapes. And it stamps it into a flared shape. It gives it dimension, a thickness more than the thickness of the sheet metal. Yeah, and it gives it strength.
Overcome the flat plate bending.
Exactly. And you've already cut the hole to take the weight out. So this takes away weight with you cutting it, and then it flares it to give it strength. It's a free lunch. You invest some time and some money, and you get a lighter weight, stronger product in the end if you're doing sheet for whatever on a car or any other project. So they're all round. Everyone makes round ones. And people have been asking us, hey, make Dimple Dies, because they want us to make ones that are cheaper. Well, I looked at the market. We couldn't make any that were cheaper. We're going to make round ones. I've got them here in the shop to test. They're going to be really cool. We came up with some stuff that other companies don't have on theirs, which is why we did it. They will not be the cheapest, period. There are companies that make them in China. They're going to be lower than us on prices. Yeah, if people care, they're going to get them from us because we make them better and we make them here. But if they don't care, they're going to buy them from China. We made shaped Dimple Dies, though. We've had them for a couple of years.
Yeah, like the stars and the squares and stuff?
Yeah, we've got star, square, oval, triangle. These things don't have a lot of technical application. I mean, the triangle, you could probably cut more out of a triangular shaped piece if you use the triangular shaped Dimple Die after you cut it, if you're going to dimple it compared to round. So there's some technical stuff like that, or like our stars. There's a lot of points and radii in there. Great traction if you use it upside down on a step. Hey, that's better traction than a round Dimple Die because people put steps on their block sliders and stuff. But basically, it's style. Most people doing Dimple Dies are doing it for style. The race teams do it. I want it too. So we made shaped ones because they're cool and no one made them. And I just thought it'd be
something fun to have. Yeah.
Yeah, they're selling, and that's one of those things that's for us that's hard to sell because people aren't searching for it if they don't know it exists.
Yeah.
We sell a decent number of them though. That's a good product for us. The drill press reduction, it's the same thing. No one knows what to look for. They are sitting here drilling with a drill press that you can go buy off the shelf anywhere. Home Depot, Lowe's, Harbor Freight, all these places sell drill presses, and they go from like 250 to like 3,500 RPM. Usable range on wood, probably honestly 200 to like 1,000. Usable range on plastic is probably 500 to 3,000 if you're drilling circuit boards. Who's drilling circuit boards with a drill press? Nobody.
Nobody knows.
Usable range on metal is probably 50 to 600, 700. And no drill presses that are under $1,000 can do 50 RPM that I've ever found. So we made a drill press reduction kit. This thing's got a really flexible bolt pattern into the plate, and it goes between the motor and the drill press, and it gives you another pulley and allows you to slow the drill press down with more belts. And they're relatively inexpensive. They're like 150 or $60, and they bolt onto almost anything. And so we sell a great deal of those. But the problem is people don't know how to find it. They don't know what it is.
Yeah.
These guys are in the garage just cursing at their drill press for burning up a bit, and they might not even know why they're burning up bits. doling them out for over temp. And so they might not even know what the solution is. But guys that figure out that they need to slow down, we've catered our webpage so that when they type it into Google, they end up finding us. So
Nice.
It does work. We also have a gusset press brake that bends, people call them tacos, but basically it's a piece of sheet metal bent into a taco shape, and it goes into the corner of a tube junction, and it makes a little saddle gusset. And that's a really neat tool. You can make that with a CNC press brake if you have, $400,000 you want to spend
Yeah.
on press.
You always was curious about how people made those, and I think that you just buy them, like you just buy them
people
made
buy 'em,
from
and
somebody, but you guys can make them.
They're very expensive. Yeah. So people listening, if you want to that makes a couple $100 a week, you can make gussets and sell them online.
There you go.
We've got customers that sell our Dimple Dies in plates. They just take a star-shaped Dimple Die, take a 12 by 12 plate, and they put 3 stars in it, and they sell them on eBay.
Wow.
I see it all the time. And I don't know how much money that's making, but I see it and I'm like, wow, we should do that instead
That's
of
really
him.
cool. Yeah.
But so there's other products on our webpage that you already identified and named, and those are basically them. We don't sell as many of those, but they're interesting. And the gusset press brake is another one that people aren't looking for it. They don't know what to call it when they type it into Google. And people generally, like you said, they buy them pre-done, which are very expensive. They're like $25-$30 a piece for those gussets. Or they are just metal working handy type of guys, and they go out with a hammer and a piece of tubing and they bend them themselves, or they put them in a vise, or they make some sort of thing themselves that does it, but doesn't do it as repeatably or as clean as our tooling does it, but it works.
Yeah. So touching on the promotional side, what are you doing to get the name out there? Like, so you mentioned you're doing like Google AdWords, and you're doing Facebook ads, or you're doing forum stuff, or you're going to trade shows. Like, what are you doing actively to get the brand out there and all the products that you make?
We started trade shows. That was the biggest way to just start off. And when you've got a fan base of 0, you go to a trade show, you're going to get 10, 20 people interested minimum per day. I mean, if you have anything interesting to anybody who's there.
What was the first one that you went to?
The Puyallup swap meet is a high performance and 4x4 swap meet.
Okay.
And I know you guys are all laughing, but 4-wheel parts goes to that every year.
Yeah.
And Goat Built goes to that every year. It's weird. There's a dude selling rusty engine blocks that aren't even usable and bald tires next to 4-wheel parts. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Everybody. There's the whole range. And so we still go to that one. That's our favorite show. It's close. It's like 3 hours drive for us, and a lot of revenue, short amount of time, minimal investment in terms of, manpower and travel. We've gone to King of the Hammers. We've gone to Dune Fest. Dune Fest is a local one. Think of like Glamis, but maybe a third or quarter the size of like one of the biggest weekends there, something like that maybe. Dune Fest is big for Oregon, and it's fun, but it's hard for us to generate a whole lot of profit there.
Okay.
And we eventually, mostly for family reasons, I pulled out of shows. It was tough because, I've got right now about to be 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and love my kids, love my wife, love my family. I like spending time with them, and I have to give up going camping or doing something to go work on the weekends when I worked,
The full
10-hour
week, yeah.
days all week and 10-hour days when I get back. And so I cut the shows down because it was too much work. And so we do Facebook advertising. We do a lot of it. It works really well for us, and it's affordable for us considering our audience and how we acquire them. We've got a lot of metrics like Facebook's pixel system and Google's analytics platform.
Okay.
And we use those two things extensively to determine where our traffic is coming from, what they're doing, what they're buying, how much they're spending, and how often they're returning, and all that. And we get a better return on our investment through Facebook than we do through Google AdWords. That has to do with the keywords that we're bidding on Google. Our competitors are spending more money than we want to.
Yep.
So when I look at how much it costs me to get a website visit from Google AdWords, it doesn't produce positive revenue at the end when they buy something, because it costs so much money for me to get someone there who's going to buy something. That's a very specific situation. So for people listening, don't take that to be just a flat line.
Yes, yeah, it can be different depending on the market that you're in.
Our
Yeah.
exact situation. After I looked at my analytics and analyzed everything, it was better for us to do Facebook for right now. So we're doing that. We've done some on Instagram. It doesn't make as much money. We seem to get a lot more post likes than followers, and we want followers. We want long-term engagement, and we do still do work on forums. They seem to be kind of going by the wayside because there's a lot more social media activity, but we're still doing it. And I've done some banner advertising that did not pay as well. The whole banner advertising world is still really stuck on impressions and cost per impression. And I care about cost per engagement. I want a website visit or a click of some kind. And they don't charge based on that because, of course, it's based on how weak your content is or how strong your content is. And I could not properly segment my customers well enough with banner advertisement to get a high enough click-through rate. So I abandoned banner advertising for the time being because it wasn't paying off as well as Facebook was. So.
Well, what is like the 1-year plan for the business?
Ship orders on time.
Just reducing the wait time to get product out.
No, 3 months ago we had people waiting like 3 weeks for products, at least 3 weeks to 5 weeks. It was frustrating. It was difficult. We just had more sales than we had people. It was too hard to keep up. Things slow down in the summer for us. Everyone's out playing and racing instead of building. So right now it's a lot easier for us. We're focusing on organizational stuff. We've got that new shop being built right now. Like I said, it's going to be roofed in about a week, and then we're going to be, doing the epoxy coating on the floor and lighting and electrical and all that. And that's going to be really a streamlined packaging facility where we're going to store finished goods inventory and we're going to package. It's going to be very, very smooth, very organized and clean. And the new shop, the current shop's relatively clean too, but it's not nearly as well organized because there's stuff that's just locked in place because of storage constraints. We can't move it because it can't fit anywhere else. And so there's a lot of additional steps being taken, similar to like you said your first job, the efficiency analysis. You'd walk into our current shop and you'd have to throw up or run away.
But you're constrained, so you're working, doing the best that you can.
Yeah, the 1-year plan is to fix that. We can do a lot more with the 6 people we have once we have our organizational problems alleviated or improved upon. So that's really the 1-year plan, and to finish up the developmental work that I've been working on for several years. That's going to be released later this year. That's a big part of it too, and I wanted that done before the building went up. But you can see how life takes its place.
It doesn't always work out that way, but it's good to have a plan. At least you got some goal to go towards. So what about the 5-year plan for the business? Where do you see yourself at that point?
The 5-year plan is probably going to be an entirely new location that is better for semi-truck access. Right now we're kind of remote, like out in farm country, and it's zoned properly and it's legal and everything's smooth and running right. But just the location for customer access in semi-trucks is not as ideal as it could be. And I don't want to keep telling semi-truck drivers, oh, don't bring a 53, bring it tomorrow, deliver it tomorrow, whatever. So that's really the reason for going off site. But there's also more of an investment purpose in that. I'd like to have the building in a bigger single space that's not 2 joined buildings with different heights. And we do not have access to plant generated 3-phase power, like actual 3-phase line power from our local utility. So we're generating it right now with phase converters, and it works, and it works great, but it's a little bit expensive and it's unnecessarily complicated and it limits you on current. So that's really the big wall between us and in-house CNC machining is the power input. We've got the space. I've got the know-how. We just don't have the power to power the machinery. We can get halfway there. We can do some of it, but doing all of it long-term to run those ROI calcs and get the correct machinery in here that is automated enough to do it, but unautomated enough to be affordable, it requires more than the 20 to 40 horsepower of power that we'll have access to, at least at one time. And so that's also pushing us off site. But that's really the 5-year plan, is to prepare for that and transition to that smoothly as we continue to grow, check off the development items from our list and continue identifying people with advertising and growing our fan base and things like that. So we've got obviously just the standard operations of marketing to grow our business with, but the product developments are really what keep people coming back to our business, because it really just enriches the fabrication industry to have innovation taking place. And a lot of our competitors are a little more stagnant in that area because they've been around longer and they've got something that works, and they're not stirring the pot.
Yeah. Totally understand that. It's always good to come in and kind of shake things up and stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, hopefully that's an organized enough answer for a 5-year
plan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's great. So like the building you're erecting right now, that's kind of an interim spot then, huh? That's kind of addressing an immediate need, but not a long-term need.
Yeah, kind of a holdover. It's, 3 years at the very least. It could be 10. It could be the rest of my life. I don't know. Yep. But it's gonna. I don't think it's a permanent solution.
Okay. Well, this is kind of a two-part question here. What is the thing you dislike the most doing at your job, like at the business?
I'd say damage control on Facebook rants.
Okay, so social media babysitting.
Yeah, people have attitudes and egos, and there's no risk online, and they just let it rip.
Yeah.
And they say whatever they want to say, and who knows if they're intoxicated when they say it or not. But it's difficult, because then you've got your public image, and you want to address this, and you might want to address some facts that are in it, and you might want to reply to the person, and it's hard to convey those things professionally without people getting mad and starting an internet fight, and it's challenging. And hindsight's always 20/20. You always see the response and say, "Oh, I should have said it this way." But
so having to manage that is tough. So you're actually like trying to mitigate it and like take a little bit of control over the situation.
Yeah, and it's probably not a mystery to most people. You can hide Facebook comments.
Yeah.
If you don't like what someone said, you can hide it. But a lot of times they bring up something valid, and they'll say, "Oh man, well I did this and that broke." It's like, okay, well, this is not the venue for this kind of inquiry into our warranty, but that's covered by warranty. If it happened during normal use, can you tell me what you did? Well, I did what I was supposed to do. And, they always, they're always super defensive. And it's like, look, we're not going to charge you $700 for parts for a machine that's $725.
Yeah.
If you broke it, tell us you broke it. We'll make you a deal. We'll make it right. We're not out to get anybody. We already sold you the machine and made some money. We don't need to make a killing on the parts. So it's difficult with that, but yeah, we do try to reply to them. We try to calm them down and say, "Hey, what problem are you having?"
Yeah,
or some guys will just reply with one-word answers, and they'll just say "suck" or "terrible" or "crooks" or "liars" or something. And the more popular you get, the more hate mail you're going to get. And I understand that. And sometimes those people, if you reply to them and say, "What don't you like?" and they just reply with like GIFs and memes and dumb social media hipster comedy crap, and it's like, okay, this is no longer worthwhile. You just hide the comment.
Yeah,
but
you're just done with it.
But I even if someone just posts something nasty with a bunch of 4-letter words in it, I say, "Hey, what's going on? Tell me about it." We can tolerate some bad press. I want to know what this person's beef is, what they're upset about. And honestly, unfortunately, at least half the time, it's like throwing rubber at a wall. You can't get.
Yeah, you're not going to change it. Well, what about most
of the time they're just weird, but.
So what about your favorite thing about working at the business? What do you like most about it?
Same thing, engaging with customers, but engaging with them when they're positive.
The positive side, huh?
Yeah, I love seeing what our customers build. We feature that stuff on our Facebook page a lot. We'll say, "Hey, look what this person built. They put a GSX-R 1000 motor in a hill climb dirt bike. I haven't seen it yet. Look, this is super cool. They built the whole bottom frame with our tubing bender and did all the notching with our notcher." And that's really the best thing about our business, is seeing that kind of stuff. Or recently, Jeff Lutz is a consumer of our products. He's got our bender and our notcher on a cart and everything, and he built his last car with it, or at least rebuilt it. I'm not sure when he got the product and built the car, but he really smashed the car up hard and rebuilt it with it, and the whole front end. And he was recently on Street Outlaws wearing one of our hoodies, like on national TV.
Yep.
And that was just like a big, like, "Oh my gosh, look at his shirt. It's got our name." And I don't know if anyone else could read it, but I can. So those things are super rewarding, just seeing those big, drops of success, and customers that like our product, obviously, is another one.
Awesome. Well, I've got one kind of fun question that I always like to ask the guest, and it's what is your daily driver vehicle, going to and from the grocery store with?
My daily driver vehicle is a 2012 Volvo S60.
Okay. Is that the big end? Does that one have the big engine in it?
Yeah, the biggest one they offer. Yeah. It's a T6R design. So they offered that with a 2.5 liter 5-cylinder and a 3 liter 6 and a 3 liter higher boost 6. It's a turbocharged 6-cylinder inline all-wheel drive. So there's a lot going on under the hood. It's got a transmission and 6 cylinders between the wheels. It's a cramped for space, but and I think it's like 350 horsepower.
It's got a slouch, yeah.
It's got a K-Pax performance package on it, which turns the boost up even higher, and not much. It's like a PSI or two. But that's a dealer option package someone installed before I got it. I got it used. And so it's fun. It's a little all-wheel drive car. It's good for going up the mountain to go snowboarding, and it's good for driving the kids around. It's safe, and it's fun, and it's, it's easy to drive.
Good one,
yeah.
So just kind of to close out here, if people are interested in finding more about the company and taking a look at your products, where can they go online to get more information?
If they prefer social media over the internet, just type Rogue Fabrication and Facebook, any spelling, into Google, and you should be led to our Facebook page. It's also facebook.com/RogueFab, RogueFab, and that is the webpage, roguefab.com. Our webpage is the best place because you can get to our Facebook from there. You can get to our YouTube channel from there. And we have a ton of customer reviews that aren't on Facebook or Google on our webpage from back before we used those platforms for reviews. And you can watch videos on there. You can get a ton of information about tubing benders, even ones that we don't make, different styles of benders on our webpage. There's a lot of reading and tech info there, and even a tube calculator. So there's a bunch of cool stuff, but our webpage is definitely the #1 location for info on our products.
Awesome, man. Well, that is fantastic. And again, I really thank you for taking some time and telling us about your story and your product and your company. So again, really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for all the well thought out questions, Todd. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to Do It for a Living. You can find out more about this guest, this show, and even details about what we just talked about at our website, doitforaliving.net. Check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/doitforaliving. And most importantly, subscribe to the podcast. Click subscribe. Do it now. Seriously. I'll wait while you grab your phone. Open up the podcast app. Tap the subscribe button. When you subscribe, you help us gain momentum and attract more high-level guests. Thanks for listening, and good luck.